All right, welcome back. We are on episode 7 already. Wow, this is exciting. We're delving even deeper into the beautiful, luminous world of Hafez.
It's amazing. Every time we dive into Hafez, it's a new discovery. It's so much depth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as with all of our Hafez explorations, the inspiration for this deep dive is coming from those awesome conversations between Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani on the Marifat program.
And I think it's important just to remind everybody right at the top that this is a translation. We're
Yeah.
dealing with Iranian philosophers. We're dealing with Persian, Farsi. So sometimes things might get a little, something might be lost in translation. So we apologize in advance for any discrepancies there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important to keep in mind as we go through these different episodes and different topics, is that we're really trying to do our best to bring these concepts, into English, but sometimes we might miss things. Anyway, today we're looking at light. We're going to be looking at Partow, which is light in Persian, and how that relates to perception, which is Nazar.
Right.
And this is going to be rooted in the very first line of a beautiful ghazal that is quite well known in Persian.
Yep.
It's this one. Roshan as Partow royat nazari niskanist. Manate kaki darat bar basari nistkanist.
There is no gaze that is not illuminated by the light of your face. There is no sight that does not bear the grace of the dust of your threshold.
So much in there, right?
A lot packed into that, yeah.
And the goal today, what we really want to try to convey to you, is how Hafez uses this verse, and particularly this first line, to give us his profound insights into the nature of reality and the act of perception.
Yeah.
So to start to kind of unpack this, let's go to Dr. Larijani and how he talks about Hafez's language in general.
He calls him Arshi, which means celestial, of the highest realm. And he says that even though Hafez has, like any speaker, ups and downs, his speech has, like peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
But even his earthly expressions have roots in this celestial perspective.
So I love that because it really is saying, even when he's talking about, maybe love or earthly concerns, it always has this connection to something much greater.
Right, exactly. And this is the beauty of that line, right?
Right.
Roshan as Partow royat nazari nist. There is no gaze that is not illuminated by the light of your face.
Yeah.
And that word Partow, it's interesting.
Yeah, tell us about it. So Partow, we've translated it as light, but it means ray or beam of light. It's directly connected to Nur, right, which is light.
Exactly.
So it makes me wonder, like when we see, are we seeing light or are we seeing the reflection of light?
That's a really good question, and that's a question that philosophers and scientists have actually pondered over. Are we seeing the essence of light, the kiaya, or are we seeing Partow, which is the reflection?
Like you can't stare directly at the sun, like it's too intense, so you can't see the source of the light, but you can see the light, illuminating objects.
Yeah.
Right, it's bouncing off of things,
Yeah, we can only see it on an au foyer, which means illuminated, like an illuminated object. We can't see the raw essence.
Right. And this is where Hafez gets really beautiful because he connects this idea of Ruyi Mashuk, the face of the beloved, to Norimaz, pure light.
Yeah.
So the beloved here, as is the case in all, mystical poetry, has multiple layers.
Yeah.
It can be the earthly beloved. It can be the hakiki, the real, which is, ultimately God.
God, the Mashuk al-Mashuk.
Right, the beloved of beloved.
Beloved of beloved.
Hak Tabarak wa Ta'ala, right.
That's right.
But I also love how Dr. Dinani really makes it clear that when he says, the light of your face, he's talking about the Jamali, the beauty,
right,
and the gentleness of God, as opposed to the Jalali, which is the majesty and might.
Exactly. It's not the wrathful side. It's not the power side. No. It's the illuminating side, the beauty side, the gentleness side.
And so you think about, the Quranic verse, Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth.
Allah nur samawati wallard.
Yeah. I mean, it's so direct.
Yeah.
He's just saying, I am light.
That's right. As opposed to like the philosophical terms, right? Yeah. The necessary being.
Like wajib al-wujud darala yatanahi, the infinite essence.
Yeah.
Right.
It's more abstract.
Whereas the Quran is saying, no, light.
Yeah, exactly. And this reminds us, of our previous discussions about Surati, right?
Suhrawardi.
And how for him, wujud existence is contingent, right? It's itibardi. Whereas nur, light, is the fundamental reality. So it's like, for him, the asala, the primacy, belongs to nur.
Yeah, so everything exists because of light.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And, this goes all the way back to, like, ancient Iranian thought, right? Which places a huge emphasis on light. And then, of course, in the Quran as well, we have that beautiful name of God, Nur al-Anwar, light of lights.
Yeah.
So Hafez is really in line with this, like, Ishraqi, this illuminationist approach. He starts with Nur rather than with being, the way that the Greeks started with being.
Yeah, yeah. So it really is, he's not just saying, oh, there is no gaze that is not illuminated by the light of your face.
Yeah.
It's not just like a poetic thing. He's making a really strong statement here about every act of perception.
That's right.
Every time you see, every time I see, every time an animal sees, it's happening through this, Partow Nori Hak, this ray of the light of truth or the light of God.
Exactly, exactly. And I think it's important also to point out that when we say Nazar, right, gaze or sight, we're not just talking about like physical seeing with the eyes, right?
Right.
It's not just Nazari Zahiri, the outward gaze.
Right.
It's also Nazari Manawi, right? The spiritual gaze, the contemplation, the intellectual attention, the insight.
Like when you call someone, Sahibe Nazar or Ale Nazar, which is insightful, like, they're insightful people, they see things deeply,
Yeah.
and that implies, taqwal and tafakkur and tadabbur,
Yeah, exactly.
all this deep, thinking and reflecting and tamol,
Yeah.
and even seeing through khayal, imagination, and
Yeah.
illusion or fantasy. This is all forms of Nazar.
Exactly.
But they're just on different levels.
Yeah, different levels. And so the Partow Nor that Hafez is talking about is not just sensory light.
Right, right. Not just Nuri Hazi.
Yeah, because, God is Nori Manawi, spiritual light, Nori Mitlak, absolute and pure light.
Right, right. And that encompasses both, the sensory light
Right.
lets us see, but then also the spiritual light that illuminates everything.
Exactly. All the faculties, even like Alquil, intellect,
Yeah.
which is also Nori.
Right. So it's like even that mind's eye,
Yeah.
right, is illuminated by this.
Exactly.
So this brings us to this beautiful definition of Nur given by, the Hokama, the sages, and the Ali Marfat, the people of Gnosis, the mystics,
Yeah.
often attributed to Mullah Sadra. But actually, Dr. Larijani corrects him and says it goes back to Suhrawardi, who says, Azahar bedatihi wa al-muzir li gairihi.
That which is manifest in itself and makes others manifest.
So what Suhrawardi is saying here is that Nur is Zahir Badati Qad. It's manifest in itself. It doesn't need something else to make it apparent.
Exactly. It's luminous, it shines, and through shining, it makes everything else visible.
Right.
It's the principle of visibility.
So it's self-evident, and then it makes other things visible.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is like the foundation of Nur, right? It's self-evident and it makes things visible.
Yeah, I mean, this is huge. And so Hafez is putting this, into his poetry, and that's just one line,
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful. Rumi also talks about this. He says, Nuri chasham as Nuri de last. Nuri chasham as Nuri de la hasil last. Nuri de lori kodast. Kuzi Nuri aklo has pako joda.
The light of the eye is from the light of the heart. The light of the eye is attained from the light of hearts. Light is light. The light of the heart is the light of God. Behold the vessel of the light of intellect and sense, pure and distinct.
So beautiful. And I think that's so helpful because he's kind of making the same point, but he's also like really spelling out the level.
And he's emphasizing the unity of Nur.
Yeah.
So that we don't think, like, there's different types of light.
Right.
Like, fundamentally, there's one light.
Yeah.
It's just manifesting in different ways.
Yeah.
And the light that we see with our physical eyes is, like, the lowest level.
Right.
And then you have the Nur of a girl. Ish, love. Hidayat, guidance. Mani, meaning the del, the heart. And ultimately, Nur al-Anwar.
God.
God.
So you see this beautiful kind of like spectrum
of light.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it comes back to this idea that, if intellect wasn't Nurani, wasn't luminous, nothing would be manifest to it.
Yeah.
It needs that light.
Right. And so Rumi's verse is like a beautiful interpretation of Hafez's line, right?
Yeah.
It's conveying that same idea that Nur is like the fundamental reality.
Yeah. And there's this like beautiful interplay, between the baton, the inner, and the zahir, the outer, And a personi kamal, perfected individual, someone who can see both, can navigate both.
That's right.
And so, everywhere we go, there's Noor.
Yeah.
But it's manifesting in different ways.
Different levels.
Yeah, on these different levels. And so this is what Hafez is pointing us to.
Exactly.
Yeah. So beautiful. This connection between Noor and Akwar, light and intellect.
Yeah.
Right? So profound, like our ability to reason, our ability to understand things is a form of light, and it's illuminated by this Nuri Hakiki,
right.
The true light.
Right. And you see this beautifully articulated at the beginning of Fatima's, Khutbah Fatakiya, right?
Yeah.
The sermon of Fatah, where she says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa la sharika lah kalima jala ikhlas tawila kulub mosul wa anara tafakura makalaha.
So I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, the one, without any partners. A word. He made sincerity its reliance, its return, hearts connected and illuminated its reasoned thought.
Right.
And so there, right? Wahana afakora makalaha.
Yeah, and illuminated its reasoned thought. So makul, that which is reasoned.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Intelligible.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes apparent through akal, which is itself illuminated by the light of Hak, the truth God.
Yeah.
So akal is a Partow inore Hak.
A ray of light of truth.
Exactly.
I also love how she says, Ja Allah ikhlas tawilaha, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He made sincerity its reliance or its return. And so tawil, like in that context, means to return to the origin, to the essence.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So true ikhlas, sincerity, purity, is achieved by returning to that al, to the origin.
Yeah.
Which is Nur al-Anwar.
Yeah.
You see.
So beautiful. So now to the second part of that first line, Menate kakak edarat bar basari niskenist. There is no sight that does not bear the grace of the dust of your threshold.
Right. And so now we move from the light to the dust.
Yeah, to kakidar. So here we see like this beautiful zabane ashagane.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The language of love. Yeah. And so even though like the message is still very philosophical, the expression now takes on this like, heartfelt, more intimate quality. So kak, dust, earth is connected to tawazo, humility.
Yeah.
Humility.
The act of sarbi kak sedan, like putting your head on the ground, prostrated.
Yeah.
And so sajda, prostration, is the ultimate kind of physical manifestation of humility.
That's right.
Right. You're putting your jebhe, your forehead, holy vojudi, and sound like the peak, right?
Yeah.
Of human existence. You're putting that on the dust.
That's right.
And so Alamakabatabay beautifully connects like this act, right?
Yeah.
Of putting your forehead on the kakikui yar, the dust of the beloved's abode, to Etzal, like this connection.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that this leads to basirat, like this inner vision, this spiritual discernment.
Inner vision.
Yeah. And so what he's saying, menate kakitara parabasari niskenis, it's like, every sight, every instance of vision is indebted to the grace emanating even from the dust of the beloved's threshold. Exactly. And this begs the question, what being is not Rahim, indebted to the Khalik, to the Creator?
Right.
Everything owes its hasti,
right,
its existence to Hak, to God.
Right.
Yeah.
So this menat, this grace, isn't just like, some small kindness.
Yeah.
This is the grace of creation.
Of creation, of being.
Like our very existence is grace.
Yeah.
And the fact that we can perceive that is also grace.
That's right. Exactly. And this is very much connected to this mystical idea of Shikistan Kodi, right?
Mm-hmm.
The breaking of the ego.
The breaking the self. Yeah.
Right. When the ego, the maniat, is overcome, Hak, the truth, can manifest more fully.
Mm-hmm.
And you see this beautifully in that poem by the Arif, the mystic about the lover becoming the beloved through the gradual disappearance of the self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this reminds us of Rumi's beautiful verse about, negating the ego in the presence of the divine.
Mm-hmm.
He says, Shunke man nistam in manza haust. Bishi den man harke damzat gafrust.
So beautiful. Since this I of mine is not truly mine, it originates from him. Whoever asserts their I in the face of this ultimate I is misguided.
That's right. So there's a distinction to be made here between the Ana al-Haq, the I am the truth of Pharaoh, which is like ultimate ego, ultimate ignorance, and the Ana al-Haq of Halaj.
Right, right.
Which is annihilation. It's the truth speaking through divine indwelling.
Yeah.
It's that rest in his Cody, like liberating oneself from the ego so that Haq can take your place.
Right, right. And this is this also brings to mind like the story of Moses in the burning bush.
Yeah.
Where the Ana al-Haq was heard from the Shajari Tawhid, the tree of divine unity.
Exactly, exactly.
And so the ability to perceive that is not just about the physical seeing. It's about this, like the gush, the ear, and the chasham of the heart.
Exactly. And, Kalim, which is speaker with God, which was the title given to Moses, right?
Yeah.
Is connected to skem, hearer. So to be able to speak the truth, you have to be able to hear it.
Right.
If your inner ear is closed, how are you going to utter it?
Right. So beautiful.
Yeah.
So that divine call, that nidhi hak, right, is always present.
Yeah.
In the alam has.
The world of being.
The world of being.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a matter of like having open ears, open eyes.
Yeah.
The heart.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So we're still in the first line of this poem.
Yeah. Lot in that first line.
There's so much in there. We're going to go to the second line just for a second, which says, Nasare roe tu saheb nazaro an ari, sare gisoe tu darhich sare nist kenist.
The insightful ones indeed gaze upon your face, but the secret of your tresses is in no head that is not.
Okay, so here he's making this distinction between the Nazar, right?
Yeah.
The people of insight who have that shurfud.
Like witnessing.
Yeah, witnessing. And Tahal, the intellect. So they can actually see Hoihak, the face of truth, in the Partow Nur.
Right, that's right. In that light.
In that ray of light.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's Nazar.
Yeah.
And then he contrasts that with Sar, which is a secret or mystery.
Yeah.
So there's like, there are people who can see the divine light, but then there are deeper mysteries.
Deeper mysteries. And he says, like, no Sar, no head, no being is devoid of Sarihak, the secret of truth.
Right.
And this extends into the Alame Mohabbat, the world of love.
Yeah.
Because Ensen, human being, is created with Mohabbat love.
At the core.
Yeah.
At the core. Yeah.
And then he talks about Gisu, tresses or hairs, all locks or curls. So what's going on there?
Well, Gisu symbolizes that Makam e kasrat tajaliyat e haktal daran alam.
Oh my God.
The station of the multiplicity of God's manifestations in this world.
Yeah.
So it's like the world of kasrat, pluralities, diversities.
Right.
And so like all of those secrets, the Asrar, right, of Hak, they're present in all of creation, from the smallest particles, the Zarat, all the way to the cosmos.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like everyone has a piece of that secret, but you see it according to your estidad, your capacity, your potential.
Right.
And Alamat Tabatabai has a really beautiful interpretation here, where he says, Engisu ke mijumade payami darat. These tresses that stir have a message. Pay attention to the rams, the mystery, in this movement.
Harkesar darad, hamsar dad. Whoever has a head has yielded a secret.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So the tresses stirring, right? Yeah. It's like, there's a jarian, there's a flow.
Flow and tagir, there's change.
Yeah.
And this is happening in the Alame Kasarat, the world of multiplicities. Yeah. And it reminds us of that concept of harakate johari, substantial motion.
Yeah.
So it's like it all connects back to that first line, right? Where all these jelveha, these manifestations are like inviting us to go deeper, to understand.
Yeah.
Right.
And just to clarify, these Sahib Nazarian, these insightful ones, they are the ones with that amkak, with that depth of thought. And they can see, they can delve into the batan, the inner dimension of reality, right? Whereas, we have the Nazari Zahiri, which is the outward gaze, but Sahib Nazar implies something much deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this all comes back to this idea that the alam, the world, is Nazar.
Yeah.
You know, it's kash, it's unveiling, it's fam, it's understanding, it's didan, it's seeing.
It's inkishaf, it's revelation.
It's revelation, you
Yeah.
know? And so these Aheb Nazarian, they can also be understood as these arbabe ukol,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, these masters of intellect.
Masters of intellect.
You know, whose insight is illuminated by that Nuri Allah, that light of God.
Right, exactly. And, you know, Noor has Merateb
Yeah,
levels.
yeah.
So there's a spectrum
Yeah.
from like the weak light of a firefly all the way to Noor an Anwar.
Yeah.
You know,
It's a spectrum of illumination.
that's right.
Yeah.
And its perfection, of course, is in that kind of Don Alay, right? The family of the prophet.
Yeah, yeah. And you think about this beautiful hadith about Fatima, you know,
Yeah.
where the prophet relates that Angel Gabriel came to her with this special greeting from God.
Yeah.
You know, asking her what her desire was.
Yeah.
You know, and she says, Shagatani masalato lazate kidmatihi lahatili kaire nazar ila washil karim.
The matter of the pleasure of his service had occupied me. I have no need other than to gaze upon his noble face.
Wow.
So beautiful.
I mean, this is Irfan, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Detachment.
Detachment. Like,
Right.
I don't want anything. I just want to